Alright, so today we're going to be talking about how blood flows through the heart. We're going to be using the diagram that you should have picked up when you came into the room. What I would do is go ahead and glue it into your journal. Don't use too much so that you're still able to write on it, because we are going to be labeling different things as we go through the blood flow process. Alright, before we go into the pathway, we're going to go ahead and label some of the structures on here. I'm only going to write the abbreviation just to make it a little bit easier and not as crowded. So the first thing that you want to label is going to be the superior vena cava. I'm just going to put S for superior and then vena cava, or I'm just going to put vena. Then you want to label your right atrium, but I'm just going to abbreviate it with RA. So let's see if we can get this to work. So right atrium. On the right side, that is where you're going to have your tricuspid valve. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of draw an arrow here. And then I'm just tricuspid valve, so I'll put a V, followed by the right ventricle. Up here you're going to have your, so here you're going to have your pulmonary. I'm just going to put pulm, V for valve. Here you have your left atrium. On the left side, you have your bicuspid valve. Just put a V. And then you have your left ventricle. And then this valve here, this is your aortic valve. Aortic valve. I'm just gonna put a V. Okay. Let's see. The next one is going to be this vessel here. It looks like a big T. That is your pulmonary. So I'm just once again going to abbreviate it with pulm. This is known as your pulmonary trunk. This big kind of horseshoe or U-shaped vessel, this is your aortic arch or your aorta. Down here you have your inferior vena cava. I'm going to go ahead and have y'all sketch another vessel down here. And this is your descending. Descending. I know I can't spell, so that's okay. Descending aorta. Alright, so let's go back up here to the pulmonary trunk. So this is going to be the left side, and this is going to go to the right side of your lungs. So those are your pulmonary arteries. So this is your left pulm artery, because remember, arteries are going away from the heart. This would be your right pulmonary artery. So this is going out of the heart. And then these last four vessels, this is how blood comes back into the heart from the lungs. We'll go over that here in just a second. And these are going to be your left pulmonary veins. And so this one would be your right pulmonary veins. Okay, so go ahead and make sure that you have all of these structures labeled. Hopefully on your notes you can make it just a little bit neater and possibly a little bit smaller. I'm going to go ahead and put a blank picture of the heart as we go through the blood pathways. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen is that deoxygenated blood is going to enter the heart. And I'm going to be using blue to represent the deoxygenated blood. So it's going to come in from both the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. And it's going to come in here to the right atrium. So this is going to be step number 1. All right, step number 2. The pressure inside of the right atrium is going to increase, and that's going to cause the tricuspid valve here to swing open, and this is going to allow the blood from the right atrium to rush into the right ventricle. Eventually, the right atria is going to pump, and so all the blood is going to now be inside of the right ventricle. And that is step number 2. The next step is going to be the right ventricle is going to contract, and what that's going to do is that it's going to cause the tricuspid valve here to close. And so this blood is going to put a lot of pressure onto the pulmonary valve here, and it's going to actually cause it to open. And so then blood is going to be able to rush into the pulmonary trunk. And then eventually, as it goes up, it will go through the pulmonary arteries here. So this is going to be step number 3. All right, step number 4 is blood traveling to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. So it's going to keep going over here, and then here would be your left lung, and then it's going to come out this way to your right lung. It is important to note that these are the only arteries that are going to carry deoxygenated blood. So make sure that you got that down. All right, so the blood has now left the heart to get the oxygen in the lungs, and so then it's going to make its way back to the heart, and this time it is going to be oxygenated. So I am now going to switch over to the red, and the oxygenated blood is going to come into the heart through these pulmonary veins. So it's coming from the lungs back into the heart, and this is going to actually be step number 5. Okay, so kind of go back. The blood going to the lungs is step number 4, and then blood coming back to the heart from the lungs is going to be step number 5. All right, step number 6 is that as the oxygenated blood comes in through the pulmonary veins, it's going to start filling in the left atrium. And eventually that pressure is going to increase to the point that it's going to cause the bicuspid valves here to swing open. And so this is step number 6. So once the bicuspid valve swings open, blood is going to make its way into the left ventricle. And at first it's just going to kind of do this on its own, but eventually the left atrium is going to contract, and it's going to force any leftover blood from the atrium into the ventricle. And that is step number 7. So once the left ventricle is filled with blood, the left ventricle is actually going to contract, and it's going to cause the bicuspid valve here to close shut, and then the aortic valve is going to swing open so that blood can start making its way through the aorta. And so that is going to be step number 8. All right, and then the last step of the blood pathway is that the blood that just got pumped from the left ventricle through the aortic valve is going to make its way through the aorta, and as well as the descending aorta. And this blood is going to go to all different parts of the body, and then the entire cycle will start again. So this was step number 9. All right, the last thing that I want to talk about is the conduction system that basically regulates the heart beating. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use some other color, or at least that's what I would suggest, to draw the various structures that I have shown here. So the first structure that you want to sketch is kind of like a little button looking thing, and it's going to be on the top or the superior part of the right atrium, and this is actually your SA node. So I'm just going to abbreviate it, SA node. The next structure is going to be the AV node, which you find on the inferior part of the right atrium or the superior part of the right ventricle. And once again, I'm just going to abbreviate it. This is your AV node. So the AV node kind of branches off into this section. This is actually known as the bundle of His, that is going to then separate into the right and left bundles here. So that's going to be your right bundle, and this is going to be your left bundle, and that's bundle of His, kind of like it sounds, his, not hers. And so anyway, so the AV valve goes and separates to the right and left sides, and then you're going to end up with all these little fibers at the ends of the ventricles, and these are actually known as the Purkinje fibers. So Purkinje, it's kind of spelled funny. Anyway, so the purpose of the SA node is that it is actually the pacemaker of the heart. So what the SA node does is that it regulates the heartbeat, and so it's going to be where the heartbeat, is initiated. And so the first thing that it's going to do is that it's going to send out an impulse. And that impulse is first going to cause the atria to contract. So that's going to be the first thing. So this message is going to travel, and the atria will contract, and I'm just going to kind of abbreviate it like this. And so then that message is actually going to travel from the SA node all the way to the AV node. And the AV node actually has a very important role. What it's going to do, it's actually going to delay this impulse. And the reason it wants to delay the impulse is because it wants to make sure that the atria and the ventricles don't contract at the same time. And so that's actually very important. You want to make sure that the blood has just a very steady, constant flow in one direction. And so that helps the heart pump efficiently. Okay, so the first thing is that the SA node sends an impulse. The second thing is that the AV node gets that impulse, and it's going to delay the message. And so after that message is delayed for just, you know, a tenth of a second or so, that message is actually going to travel through the bundle of His, and then it's going to go down the left and right branches, and then eventually it's going to travel all the way down to the apex, which is this bottom kind of corner of the heart. And then eventually it will spread out to the entire ventricles, causing the ventricles to contract. So that's 3. The impulse is relayed through the bundle of His and all the way down through the Purkinje fibers so that the ventricles can contract. So the series of electrical impulses can actually be viewed through something known as an electrocardiogram. You may have heard it being referred to as an ECG or an EKG. And so it's basically this wave that is showing when different things are depolarizing. So that shows when certain parts of the heart are actually contracting. And so we're going to go through that here. So the first part of the ECG wave is going to be known as the P wave. So what you want to do is you want to kind of draw a little bit of a straight line, and then you'll do a small wave. And that would be your P wave. And so the P wave represents when the atria are contracting. So I'm just going to put atria contract. The next part of the wave is known as the QRS complex. And so what you do is you're going to kind of go follow the wave a little bit, and then it dips down just a hair, and then it goes up. And it comes down, and then it goes back up. So this is the QRS. And the QRS, this is actually going to be representing when the ventricles are contracting. So these are the ventricles. I don't know what this is doing. Ventricles contract. And then the last part is known as the T wave. And so you go down just a little bit. And the T wave is actually showing when the atria and the ventricles are relaxed. Everything's kind of repolarizing, so it's going back to the charge that it originally was at. So this is the atria and ventricle repolarization. You can go a lot more complex with this, but this is to the extent that we are going to go over it. And I believe that is it. Just make sure that you have all this information in your journal. And let me know if you have any questions.